achieved.
Hey, sorry, it took me too long to hit the button to transition to the screen. What's up, everybody? As you can see on the scroll on the top, today what we are doing here from Studio Day Heffrey is I'm going to attempt to project every offensive statistic for the entire Dallas Cowboys team today, because why not? So I did this. Somebody asked my expectations for Jarwin the other day, and I gave them, and they may not be consistent with what I'm going to give here, but hopefully they're at least close, because I didn't have to use the context of the rest of the team when I was doing Jarwin's stats. So let me get exactly what you guys were asking about. Here we go. Noah Thompson said, can you break down the entire offensive stats for every skill position player for one video, and then defense in the future? And Riley Rosenbush said, predict the stats for all of the starters on offense and defense. Look, I tried really hard, so it takes too long for me to do both in one day. But here's your offense. And I think after adding it all up, everything I did, I used logic for it. I didn't just, I'm not a half-ass analyst. I do the real deal. Like, I want to know, okay, over his career and last year, what was his catch percentage? Okay, what are his targets over the career? Whose targets are we losing? Let's throw those in. What's he usually get yards per attempt? And so I tried to make it as realistic as possible using all these players' histories, right? So a year ago, Dak Prescott threw 597 passes, and he threw for over 4,900 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 11 picks. I get to Dak at the end because Dak is just the accumulation of all of your receiver stats, right? So we'll get to Dak at the end. We'll start with the running game. A year ago, Ezekiel Elliott was 301 carries for 1,357 yards and 12 touchdowns. That's 4.5 yards per carry, okay? Tony Pollard was 86 carries for 455 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's 5.3 yards per carry. Dak, 52 carries, 277 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So, let's move it forward a year. Here's what I did. I took 26 carries away from Zeke, brought him down to 275. So that I could take Pollard from 86 carries, give him 14 more. That gives him 100 carries and cuts just a few carries out to throw the ball just a little more, right? Because that's the way the league is going. So I eliminated just a few carries, redistributed just a little bit. And so here's my predictions for the Cowboys' rushing numbers on the year. These are official. Take it to the bank. Ezekiel Elliott, 275 carries for 1,265 yards and 11 touchdowns. That's 4.6 per carry. Moved him up 0.1 from a year ago because we won't have Cabo. We do have coronavirus, but I'll assume that he starts off a little better than he did a year ago. So Zeke, 275 for 1,265 and 11 touchdowns. Pollard, 100 carries, 490 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's 4.9 per carry. He was 5.3 a year ago. I just think 5.3 is a really big number. Unless you're Jamal Charles, it's going to be hard to do it again. So I brought him down a little bit. But 4.9, gave him 3 touchdowns on the ground. Dak, I'm going to give 50 carries. He had 52 a year ago. 275 yards and 4 touchdowns. Basically, very, very close to the exact same stat line last year. And a year ago, you did have some random carries for over 6 yards per. Tavon Austin and maybe Randall Cobb and Amari Cooper had a couple, but it was a total of 10 carries for 64 yards from receivers. So I'll give 15 to 20 carries at 6.4 yards per carry to Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Cool? There you go. Rushing game. Knocked out. By the way, oh, that's my alarm. Don't forget to leave in the comments. It's youtube.com/Jeff Kavanaugh. Make sure you're subscribed, and then leave in the comments what you want to talk about tomorrow, and I'll try to take care of you, although I think I'm golfing tomorrow. But I will take care of you in a future video if I can. I'm looking for the best questions, best topics to talk about. All right, receivers. Here's where I have a problem. And I don't know if I have a problem. Well, you tell me. In the comments, you tell me where I'm screwing this up, okay? Because do I think Dak's going to throw for 4,900 yards again? Probably not. Game circumstances will probably be different. But do I think the offense should be as good as it was a year ago? Yeah. You're darn right I do. You had CeeDee Lamb. Yeah. I expect this offense to be at least as good as it was a year ago. So maybe the yardage totals won't indicate it. But as I went through here, Dak had 597 pass attempts last year, so I'm giving him 600. 600 pass attempts. And I got to give out all the targets. 130 targets for Amari Cooper. He had 119 last year. 120 targets for Michael Gallup. He had 113 last year, so just 7 more, but he'll play 2 more games. This is if everybody plays 16 games. CeeDee Lamb. Randall Cobb had 83 targets in 15 games last year. I'm giving CeeDee Lamb 105. I'm giving him more than Cobb per game. I'm giving Gallup slightly less than he had last year per game. Blake Jarwin, 100 targets. Between Witten and Jarwin a year ago, you had 124 targets. So I'm taking away 24, and I'm just giving them to Jarwin. Zeke, 65 targets. He had 71 a year ago. Pollard, 45 targets. He had 20 a year ago. So tell me what in that sounds unrealistic. If any of that sounds unrealistic, let me know. I think it sounds fairly realistic. Maybe I'm giving CeeDee Lamb too much as a rookie. But without the Witten targets, they're going somewhere. And so I mostly spread them out between Jarwin and CeeDee Lamb. Amari Cooper's stat line. 86 catches, 1,290 yards, and 9 touchdowns. And I'm basically using his career catch percentage and his yards per catch. For some of them, I actually brought their yards per catch down a little bit just because of the numbers I had at the end. And I was like, what? So Michael Gallup. I'm going to give Michael Gallup, who last year was 66 for 1,107 and 6 touchdowns. That's almost 17 yards per catch. I brought down his yards per catch a little bit, but he's getting a few more targets, so I'm going 72 catches, 1,152 yards, 7 touchdowns for Michael Gallup. He's the guy that a year ago, 58% of the passes thrown to him were complete. That was the worst rate on the team. I moved him up to 60. But like Amari Cooper is 66. Randall Cobb, I think, was 66. And Michael Gallup was 58. So I brought his yards per catch down a little bit, but I brought his catch percentage up a little bit. CeeDee Lamb, 73 catches, 1,095 yards, 8 touchdowns. Those are big numbers. But Randall Cobb played 15 games. He had over 800 yards. He had drops. He's getting 15 yards per catch. How am I going to project CeeDee Lamb to have less yards per catch than Randall Cobb did? Which I did here, but just by a little bit. So CeeDee Lamb, 73 catches, 1,095 and 8 touchdowns. And maybe that's optimistic. But hey, Witten's target's got to go somewhere. And if I'm giving them to CeeDee Lamb and Blake Jarwin, then CeeDee Lamb's going to end up with numbers. So you tell me if I'm crazy. Tell me if I'm crazy. But I think that's realistic. I gave him hold on, let me do the math again. 105 targets, and I gave him 105. And I gave him, to get to 73, 73 to 105, I gave him a 69.5% catch percentage. Is that unrealistic for CeeDee Lamb playing in the slot? Maybe I could bring that down a little bit. Maybe I could bring it down to 65%. But whatever. That's what I went with. 73 catches, 1,095 yards, and 8 touchdowns for CeeDee Lamb. Blake Jarwin on his 100 targets. Last year, he caught 75% of the balls thrown to him. I'm going to keep it there. So 75 catches. Now, his yards per catch was almost 12. I brought him down to 10 because Witten had just under 8. And I got to figure that now he'll have to do some of the Witten stuff, and it won't always be Jarwin on crossers where he's got room after the catch. Like some of his catches, it'll be tough to average almost 12 yards per catch as a tight end again. So I brought him down to 10. 75 catches, 750 yards, 5 touchdowns. Zeke. He had 71 targets last year. I brought him down to 65. I got him catching 49 of those, just staying in line with his career average of catch percentage. 377 yards and 3 touchdowns as a receiver. Tony Pollard, I took from 20 catches, or from 20 targets up to 45. And I got him at 34 catches for 260 yards and 2 touchdowns. So there's your running backs. Now, when you add all that up, what are Dak's numbers? 411 for 600, 68.5% completion percentage, 4,924 yards, 34 touchdowns, and let's call it 9 or 10 interceptions. That would be Dak's stat line. And if the Cowboys have a winning record, that puts you in the MVP conversation. So does it seem wild that he would throw for 4,900 again? Yes, because last year was so weird. They were incredibly efficient offensively. They were really good offensively, but they were also in some weird games where they were kind of piling up stats late when they were way behind. So no, do I really think he's going to repeat 4,900 yards? Not necessarily. But the way that I pieced it together, I'm using the targets that are available to the team. I'm using their catch percentages historically. I'm using their yards per attempt historically. So where am I supposed to just assume there's going to be this big pullback? Maybe I'm too high on CeeDee Lamb catching 70% of his targets. Maybe I'm too high on Blake Jarwin catching 75% of his targets. And so maybe if those are closer to 60, that could knock off a couple hundred yards. But that's the math I did. What else you want me to do? That's it. That's it. Oh, and I added in, because my targets didn't add up to 600, so I added in to fill in the last 35 attempts that I hadn't given to anybody. Because a year ago, they had some catches by Tavon and Devin Smith and Dalton Schultz. So I just threw in the other 35 targets. He'll go 22 of 35. That's 65% completion to random tight ends or receivers. And we'll call it 7.5 yards per attempt, because I was trying to pull it down a little bit. Because I'm like, man, that's a really optimistic outlook for Dak. But I think it's realistic. So tell me if it's not. But that's your stat lines for your entire team right there. All your receivers, all your tight ends, your quarterback, your rushing. Got it all for you. Hit me up. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page, please. I love you if you do. Turn on the notifications so you never miss a video. And leave in the comments what you want to talk about tomorrow. I love you, and I will see you soon.